Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. We're wishing everybody a happy MLK Day. Today we celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy in the struggle for civil rights 54 years after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And it's a day to recognize, in my opinion, what it means, the fight for civil rights, the fight for equal rights, the fight for human rights. Because although it's often framed to us as a civil rights struggle in terms of African Americans and legal rights and an end to legal segregation and an end to Jim Crow, the battle that Martin Luther King fought for was deeper than that. It was deeper than uh, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 or the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And it was deeper than legal rights or legal recognition. We all know that in 1894, there was an unjust case passed called Plessy versus Ferguson that established separate but unequal laws in this country, and that when this happened, that many people were unjustly discriminated against. There were separate water fountains and there were separate buses and separate everything. And even though, from a legal standpoint, they said it was separate but equal, it was actually unequal. But one thing that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. understood, that even after that was done, he still continued to fight in other states, like the march he had in Chicago and the march he had up north, because he understood that it wasn't just giving people rights, it was about dignity and representation and the freedom to live as one chooses, and not only negative rights but positive rights as well. At the time, people today will use Martin Luther King as an example of, they'll point to Martin Luther King and they'll say, well, Martin Luther King is an example of how we should be nonviolent, how we should resist oppression nonviolently. Obviously, Martin Luther King got his um, political philosophy from his religion, Christianity, which preaches nonviolence if you follow it correctly, and also from the political philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, who was the independence leader of India in the 1940s. But I think that they unfairly um, they unfairly use him as a weapon. They'll use him as a weapon now, and they'll say, "Well, see, you should be more like Martin Luther King when you resist the current forms of oppression, like police brutality. You know, you shouldn't use violence. Like they'll use him as a weapon against current movements, like the people at Black Lives Matter or the people that fought for the injustices against George Floyd and other people, right? Completely missing his message. They'll focus on the nonviolent part because they want the people to be passive. But that wasn't what Martin Luther King was about. Sure, he believed that violence begets more violence. That was part of his political philosophy and that was part of his faith. But he also didn't believe in acquiescing or letting people step all over you either. You can resist and not use violence, but also stick up for yourself. So when they use his name and they use his name in vain to try and calm you down politically, they completely miss his message. And I think they do this intentionally because the same people that are saying, well, be more like Martin Luther King and less like these quote unquote radicals are the same people that were saying in the 1960s when he was alive that he was a communist. In fact, they were saying it up until the 1980s. And even when people were pushing for the holiday, people were still opposing it in a lot of conservative states like Arizona. Yes, and of course the South. You had senators like Jesse Helms that was outright calling Martin Luther King a Marxist and stuff, and a communist, and saying that he had sympathy that he had sympathies with the Soviet Union. Right. And as Lisa pointed out, Republicans are using his name in vain, and they're trying to, at the same time, take away the voting rights of African Americans, do the exact same thing that he was actually fighting against uh, during his time. They really don't want to recognize the life and the accomplishments of Martin Luther King. They only want to use his memory as a weapon against people that are trying to stick up for their rights in the modern day. One thing you should never do is try to use history as a weapon against other people, because by doing that, you are stepping into false pretenses. You can't put words in the mouth of this man and try to apply what he said and twist his words around and apply it to current situations. And in fact, if they look into all of what he said, beyond the I have a dream speech, that's the only thing they really focus on is I have a dream. Beyond I have a dream, they don't focus really on much of anything. You never really hear them quoting other quotes from him about social justice and about human rights and human dignity. You only hear them talking about I have a dream today and nonviolent resistance. So in the eyes of the young people, what it looks like to them that don't really become educated on Dr. King, it looks like, oh, well, Dr. King just thought that we should just sit there and let people roll over us and sit there and let people stomp all over us and sit there and let people take advantage of us and bully us and try to take our rights away. How dare they? The same thing they're against today, tomorrow they'll be for it, and they always move the goalposts. Right. Lisa is correct. He made a lot of other speeches, a lot of other things where he talked about other issues besides the African American struggle for civil rights. Because he understood that once that was over, there was other fights of other groups that were having their rights deprived and having their rights taken away, such as the workers and the poor people and the LGBT people and the people in Vietnam. One thing that the United States government turned against Martin Luther King in the late 60s was when he denounced the war in Vietnam. His ally in the struggle for civil rights in the early 60s was JFK and Lyndon Johnson, that administration, who at first they didn't even like him because there's a quote from Jackie Kennedy that's really defaming Dr. King, but they felt they had to do something. So they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964-65. Johnson felt he had the people's ear because he won that landslide election in 64. But once Dr. King um, started to speak against the Vietnam and against the war in Vietnam and against U.S. foreign policy, they felt that it was he was overstepping his boundaries. That he was speaking on something that he shouldn't speak on, and that's exactly like it is today. Today, you're known for something. Say you're known for one issue. Say you're known for speaking against police brutality, or you're known for speaking up for voters' rights. Then they feel like, yo, well, you should just stay in your lane. You shouldn't have to speak. You shouldn't be made to speak about, U.S. foreign policy in Iraq or Afghanistan. You have your lane, and your lane is domestic. Your lane is to deal with only the African American community, and that's all you are made to speak of. Lisa saying that the nonviolent approach was used in 2020 exactly, but the media focuses on the violent, the people that were violent, and the people that were outside agitators. Those people. Those were those people back then. People back then were like that as well. People back then would come into the movement, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and they would infiltrate it, and they would try to use more militant tactics to try and undermine what he was trying to do. Because, see, one thing he understood, and that was smart about him in a sense, if you use violence, then they're going to come back on you twice as hard with the violence. And you don't have being a minority in this country, you don't really have the numbers and you don't have the might. So if they come back twice as hard, the minority side will be crushed by that physically. So not only was it applying his principles in terms of what he believed in his moral philosophy, his political philosophy, but it was a practical approach as well. Because the use of violence uh, was just gonna, his movement was just gonna end up destroyed. I mean, being perfectly honest, I mean, they had, uh, no, Lisa asked, do I think we have people that like MLK now? No, we don't. And that is part of the problem. See, the issue back then, the good thing about back then was there was religious communities, and religious communities, despite what you might feel about religion itself, and how religion is misused in the world, religious communities are the cohesiveness that holds the community together, the glue that holds the community together. If you notice, back then they would meet in these a lot of these churches. The civil rights movement initially was organized entirely by churches, and today we don't really have a sense of community in this country in terms of any community, any group. Everybody is out for individualism, and everybody is out for self. people don't even communicate with each other. People don't even speak to each other. So trying to organize a movement like that isn't really going to work. Really, what the most of people will do today is they'll make a hashtag about it. They'll make something on Twitter about it, and that'll be just it. Plus, um, people worship celebrity. There's a lot of celebrity worship these days in our society. And one thing about celebrities, the people that this generation, the millennials and the younger generation and the millennials, the Zoomers, look up to. One about thing about these people is these people are not going to speak against the mainstream because they're already bought in by the mainstream. They're bought in by one of the two political parties. They're bought in by the oppressor class. I don't the people that are trying to take away the rights. And it's not just the Republicans, it's even the Democrats. The Republicans are more forceful about it, but the problem with the Democrats is, they're too passive. They're too willing to let other people roll all over them. I posted a picture of arm in arm Barack Obama, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King on my page. And even though they all had different philosophies, obviously Martin Luther King had his philosophy that was rooted in his Christian faith. Malcolm X had a different political philosophy, and Obama's is rooted in the mainstream political approach. But after Obama, post Obama, we don't really have anybody else to really articulate the struggles that we all want. Plus, a lot of these movements that we have out now, people are just lazy with it. All they'll do is post a hashtag. They might even go to a protest. But these celebrities and these mainstream politicians, even Biden and Kamala Harris and stuff, they're not gonna speak up to the establishment because they're already the establishment. So why would they even say something to the establishment when they're already in that political class? Biden been there for years. Kamala Harris been in that system for years. Martin Luther King Jr. was not in in the political system. He owed no allegiance to anybody, only to his God, to his religion, and to his community, and to his faith. Same thing with Malcolm X. These other people that call themselves political advocates today, they all owe the allegiance to, billionaires like George Soros, and even on the other side, the Koch brothers and these individuals. They're all bought and paid for. So they're only going to speak up to a certain extent. They're not going to be willing to lay their life down for it. If you think that even people like Colin Kaepernick is going to actually lay their life down for this struggle and be willing to die for it, then you're crazy. But that leads me to another Martin Luther King quote today. If somebody hasn't found something that they're willing to die for, then they aren't fit to live. And what he meant by this was when you have a cause, when you have a belief, when you have a struggle that is a righteous struggle, you have to be willing to put your life on the line. It takes more than just a hashtag. It takes more than just a black square on Twitter or on Facebook to show that you mean business. Not that you have to be violent, not that you have to pick up bricks or you have to pick up weapons against another individual, but that you're willing to put in the work that it takes to bear the fruit. If you're a farmer, right, and you yield crops, you're gonna have to check on those crops and those plants every single day and water them and put the work in, and put the muscle in, and put the brain power in, and put the community um, sense in. If not, then it will die. You can't just say, "Oh, well, This is what I'm gonna do," and that's gonna be it. No, you have to continue to put that effort in, put that muscle in, put that elbow grease in, because the other side that opposes you is going to be willing to do the same thing. And there's a lot of people with charisma. There's a lot of people with, um, they have they're well spoken. They have, they're able to draw in crowds, but They rather use that ability, excuse me, and that talent to speak negative or to troll somebody or to go in on somebody or to diss somebody or use that energy in a negative sense. Even when with Martin Luther King, the people that disagreed with him, right, the racist and the segregationist and the others, not only did he not use, and even, you know, ones in the African American community that had a different philosophy than him, not only did he not use real violence, not only did he say, "Oh well, you gotta go after these people," physically. He never made other speeches against other people. He never spoke ill words about other people, political adversaries. People would say it against him. People in other groups would say it against him. But he never spoke an ill word towards these other individuals. He never was a politician. A politician goes back and forth with a political adversary. Even then, a politician, you know, would make speeches against another political adversary, somebody that they disagreed with. Even then, today, even worse. Martin Luther King was a man of God, a man of the cloth. He was named by his father, Martin Luther King, because he was a lot like Martin Luther, the Martin Luther of history. Martin Luther of history, Martin Luther, the German religious reformer, the founder of the Protestant movement in Germany in the 1500s. Saw some injustices in the Catholic Church and spoke against it, and posted his 95 thesis on the wall. And just like Martin Luther King, he saw an injustice and he spoke against the injustice. The practice itself. The thing is, you can, again, another Martin Luther King quote, you can be you can disagree with somebody without being violently disagreeable. In other words, like say you disagree with somebody here on YouTube. The immature thing and the low thing would be to make another video responding to them, or to make a video, insulting them, or say you're a celebrity, a rapper, or whatever, and you feel like, oh, I'm gonna make a diss record on them. I'm gonna get at them hard. No, that's not the message of Martin Luther King. Sure, you say, well, I'm not being violent. I'm just using my words. No, Martin Luther King spoke against the practices of the people, not against the people themselves, not against the messengers themselves. Because a lot of times people are manipulated by their own society, or shaped by their society, or shaped by the misinformation of their society, or shaped by the common prejudices of their society. And they should know better, but they don't. So when Dr. King understood was that you you pray that the God will change the heart of that person that's filled with hate and filled with anger and filled with animosity. You don't try to go in against them. You go again against their beliefs, but you don't go in against them as an individual, as a person. And that's the message that people miss in today's society with cancel culture and everything. They want to cancel this one and cancel that one, and they'll say, well, that person doesn't deserve a second chance, or that person, sometimes they'll even wish death on an adversary, or somebody who they disagree with, or that is is a political enemy or a philosophical enemy, not really realizing that that person could just be misled. That person could just be taught wrong. So violence, what I hope the new generation learns from MLK, that nonviolence is not uh is not just not doing anything, or being passive, or not, or allowing others to walk all over you. Nonviolence is loving your enemy, and not loving your enemy in the sense that you love the people that oppress you. You always will speak firmly about those that oppress you, and you always will stand by your beliefs and stand stand firm in what you stand for. But at the same time, you want to hope that that person changes, and that you never start striving. You never stop striving for what is right and what is just. You know, because it is a long struggle, and really the struggle never ends. The struggle uh didn't end with Martin Luther King, and it doesn't end with any man or woman. Like he said in his last speech in Memphis, I may, I may not get there with you, but I've been to the mountaintop. So he was trying to tell us in Memphis, in that speech, that it was bigger than him. The struggle is bigger than one man. The struggle is bigger than one group. The struggle is bigger than one generation. You know, It always, the struggle will continue. The struggle will continue long after we're all gone from here. But one thing we will learn from it is that we never stop fighting. We never stop struggling. We never stop striving for what is right. Remember, um, the arc of history bends towards justice, as Martin Luther King himself said. So on this day, more than any other holiday, we remember what we can do to change the circumstances around us and just to love one another and to even if we disagree with each other vehemently, that we honor and respect each other on this day. This is not just a day that we remember something that happened in history, this guy that we learned about in history class. It is something that is alive for us today. It is something that is relevant to us today. It is something that is a struggle that is still continuing to this day. It started way back in the history of humanity. For most of humanity's history, we've oppressed each other, we've enslaved each other, we've beaten each other up, we've kicked each other, we put each other down. And for most of American history, we know that they've done, that's what was done to people of color. That's blatantly obvious. But we shall all overcome one day. So, to all you guys out there and girls, have a blessed MLK Day. And remember that MLK, the person, is not just a symbol of dead history, but is a symbol of how we can all come together in brotherhood and sisterhood, and beyond just platitudes. That's another thing. People say that I have a dream speech, but what is the dream? What is the dream really? Was the dream legal legislation? Was the dream to be able to vote in elections? Or was the dream a bigger dream than that? A dream of universal brotherhood, a dream of love. He mentioned in the speech that Protestants and Catholics, Jews and Gentiles, and that's something that they overlook. He wasn't just talking about the racial situation here in the United States or the legal situation that existed here in the United States, that it was a universal struggle, a universal march to a brotherhood and sisterhood. So that's all I wanted to say on this MLK Day. And enjoy. You know, Remember, unlike other holidays, this holiday is not a day of rest. People think, oh, it's just a day I get off from work. No, it's a day when you get to work. Not work to get your paycheck, not the paycheck that you get every end of the week or every 2 weeks, but the work to make the world a better place. The work to improve the world and the community in which you live. So just by giving somebody a smile, just by giving somebody a pat on the back, we remember that the smile itself is like a charity to the downtrodden. So people have the holiday twisted, people have the holiday misconstrued because they say, oh, well, I get off from work. No, this is the day you get to work. So get to work in your own community, get to work in your own social circle to build a better world. That's what Martin Luther King to me represents. a better world, and a better vision. People say a dream, but how do we make that dream a reality? How do we make that vision manifest? Only by action, not by inaction. Peace.